Hey everyone, I promised I would be here with a wrap-up video and a TBR video, and I have made it. It's only August 8th. Check. I only read the books that I read for Booktubeathon in the month of July, which is kind of crazy. I started Six of Crows, but didn't get super far, so I'm really thankful for the Booktubeathon. It made me read in a month where I just wasn't feeling it. And I actually talk about most of these books in the Booktubeathon vlog, which I'll link down below. We're probably not gonna talk about Brave Enough because we already kind of went there, but again, we can appreciate the beautiful cover. This is a great coffee table read. The other book that I read during the Booktubeathon was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which I also already talked about on my vlogs. I really, really enjoyed it. So most people have already read these books or at least watched the movies, so you're probably already familiar with what happens. But if not, this is the 5th book in the series, the 5th year that Harry's at Hogwarts. I loved this book for so many reasons. For one, I loved that all of Harry's friends came together to take action against all of the change that was coming. I'm trying to be really vague here because I know that there are some people who still haven't read the books or watched the movies, so I don't want to be too spoilery. The second reason I love this book is because of Luna Lovegood. She is my spirit animal and I'm obsessed with her. The third reason I love this book was probably just the dynamic between the Ministry of Magic and Hogwarts and the administration. So many people choose not to believe the truth about what's happening because they're afraid. And I think that's a really scary but realistic thing that can happen in our everyday lives. So even though this is like a magical world, it feels so real. People just don't want to believe the truth about Harry's encounter with Voldemort. So I thought that was really interesting. But yes, I don't want to go too deep into this. I've already talked about it on my vlog. I'll probably have some thoughts when I finish the whole series, but I really, really enjoyed it. I think Goblet of Fire is my favorite so far, but I did really like this a lot better than I thought I would. So the next book that I read was To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. And you know when you have those books that you finish and you have some time to digest it and then your feelings about the book change? I'd love to know if this is something that happens to you because I feel like a very fluid reader sometimes. My gut reaction about a book after I finish it could change after a week or a month or a year even. Every now and then you get a book that you read and you're like, this was interesting. I can appreciate it for what it is. And then you kind of dwell on the negative things for a little bit too long. I said in my vlog that I enjoyed it. It was a fun, cute, young adult contemporary, and I stand by that. But I feel like over the past few weeks since I read this, it's gone from maybe like a solid 3-star to like a 2.5, if that makes any sense. I really, really wanted to love this book. Young adult contemporaries are my jam. I love them. Nostalgia, the whole like 16-year-old reading letters or almost like journal entries, something that's so private, that is me. I love that premise. I even enjoyed her innocence. I kind of liked that we had a 16-year-old protagonist who didn't like to drive because she was afraid, or, you know, an innocent 16-year-old girl who would rather stay at home in her pajamas and bake cookies than go out and be social. I found that really believable and refreshing because, you know, there are so many young adult books out there with a female character who's just really rebellious and disrespectful to her parents and, you know, just really cool and outgoing. And I don't know, I thought it was refreshing to have a character like Laura Jean. But I do agree with a lot of people that she did seem a little bit too immature. I think she would have made a better 13 or 14-year-old character. I think that really would have changed my opinion overall. I think my main issue was the lack of character growth. I don't feel like I can mention the main love interest without being spoilery, but I just didn't really get it. I feel like if this had happened in real life and these letters had kind of gone out into the world, it wouldn't have had the ripple effect that it did necessarily. So many of the characters were already so grounded in their relationships. I also really wanted more from Margot, her sister, and maybe there is more of Margot in the second book. But for this book, I did not like Margot at all, and I didn't understand why Laura Jean found her so endearing. I mean, I guess it's because it's her sister, but you just don't really see that connection, in my opinion. I also wanted to see more of the dad. There was just so much that I wanted to see more of, and I just felt like it was too surfacey. I felt like the ending wrapped up a little bit too perfectly. It gets resolved too quickly, if that makes sense. I do want to make it clear that this does leave you on a little bit of a cliffhanger. There are some questions. I can totally see why people would want to read the second one. I'm curious about what's going to happen in book 2. I don't know if I'll pick it up. I just really didn't love Laura Jean's voice. I didn't love the writing. I was just kind of disappointed with the character development. But I will say at times, there were some really cute scenes. I did find myself smiling at times. I'm not totally heartless. I think I just really wanted to love it and found some issues with it. So those are my ramblings about To All the Boys I've Loved Before. Now, the next book that I read in July was A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. And that's one of the short stories in a collection of short stories. And oh my gosh. If you've never read Flannery O'Connor, she's basically a Southern writer who's really known for that Southern Gothic style. Her short stories are influenced heavily on regional settings and grotesque characters. If you read her work, you'll also notice an undertone of faith and morality and ethics. I believe she was a devout Catholic living in the Protestant South, so it definitely influenced her writing. So I got a little nervous thinking about talking about Flannery O'Connor because I have several people in my life who I would consider experts on her life and her work. People who love Flannery O'Connor really love Flannery O'Connor. They know everything about her. They've just become so knowledgeable. So many of my friends who are huge fans have really studied her closely, and I just don't have that kind of knowledge about her work. But I still feel like anyone can enjoy her work without having a ton of knowledge about her personal life. So I'm not going to talk about all the stories that I read in the month of July, which was all of them. But 2 of my favorites. We'll talk about 2 of my favorites. The first one, A Good Man is Hard to Find, is one of her most famous short stories, and I can totally see why people gravitate towards this one. It so perfectly fuses the comedy and the violence and the morbid religious struggle or kind of tension that seems to be throughout all of her work. I can't really tell you much about the plot of any of these stories because, as all short stories tend to be, they're very condensed, and I don't want to give anything away. But basically, in A Good Man is Hard to Find, it starts out with a family going on a road trip to Florida. So it's 2 kids, a mother, a father, and a grandmother. So right away through the dialogue and just the masterful narration, you kind of realize that there's so much disrespect and bitterness and disconnection between these family members. The grandmother in the start of the story is very delusional and vain. She kind of reminds me of a child. She tries to assert her very high opinion that they should be traveling to Tennessee instead of Florida. And her son just kind of doesn't even acknowledge her. So desperate for attention, maybe, she tries to scare her son into changing their route to Tennessee instead of Florida by reading one of the most recent news stories about an escaped murderer called the Misfit. Trust me when I say it is a shocker. Everything from the dialogue to the detail was just so chilling and so realistic, honestly so bizarre. I loved it. I loved it. The other story I want to talk about is called The River. So it's told in an omniscient point of view, and it takes place over maybe like 2 days, I think. The main character is a boy named Harry. He's about 4 or 5 years old. His parents are neglectful partiers, I guess. And I think they're both alcoholics, or at least his mother is. And so he's kind of just left to fend for himself. So the story kind of starts out with his sitter, Mrs. Conan. She spends her time kind of in the country, reading her Bible, talking about faith healings in the river with Pastor Bevel Summers. So one morning when Harry's mom is just too hungover to get out of bed, his sitter decides to take matters into her own hands, and she takes him to one of the faith healing services down by the river. Again, I just kind of want to set the stage for your reading experience, because I want you to be surprised, and trust me, you will be. It is incredibly dark, super interesting. There are a lot of parts I loved. I loved when Harry, kind of starved for attention, tells Mrs. Conan that his name is Bevel too, after hearing her talk about Pastor Bevel. Like, it's just something a 4 or 5-year-old would do. I loved the characters' names in general. Like, there's a character named Mr. Paradise. I loved when Mrs. Conan was compared to a skeleton so many times throughout the story. I just thought that was really interesting. The details and the descriptions in general were so well done. Honestly, I could go on, and I really need to wrap things up. But if you're interested at all in the grotesque and the morbid, check out Flannery O'Connor if you haven't already. On to the TBR. So I only read 4 books in July, and so my August TBR is a little bit ambitious, at least for me. I have, again, I've talked about all of these, well, kind of. I plan to read the 6th book of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. I've heard that this is several people's favorite book, so I'm very, very excited about this. I also plan to read Me Before You. Do you guys remember my Monday Middles video where I talked about how I was going to get into this? Better late than never, I guess? I don't know. I'm going to do it. I've picked it up so many times. I did read one review that made me kind of nervous, so I haven't picked it up since, but I'm gonna do it. I'm going to the beach next week. I feel like it'll be a good beach read, I hope. It's gonna happen. You also already know that I'm reading 6 of Crows. I'm about halfway through this, and I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. I'm reading it very slowly, not because of the story, but just because life has gotten in the way. But I'm really enjoying it so far. Also, side note, I'm not really going into the plot on any of these because they've been in so many of my videos, so if you want to learn more about them, you can go watch some of my other videos. Also plan to read Sweet Bitter, which I've talked about in my last book haul. I just got this and I cannot wait. I literally have to read it right now. I'm so excited. I am also going to be reading The Final Empire, book 1 of Mistborn. I'm going to be buddy reading this with Jess McGlynn over at Catch a Single Thought. I'll link her channel down below. She's awesome. I really, really enjoy her videos. Love her thoughts on every book that she reads. So yeah, I'm gonna be buddy reading with Jess, and she just got the books. Like I think she bought them all together too, and they just came in the mail, and she sent me a picture and was so excited, and I was like doing a little dance. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun with this one. And also I talked about, well, I didn't talk about, my friend Tracy talked about this book in my most recent haul video. So if you want to hear what this is about, you can go watch that video. I'm also finally listening to The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I started listening to it, and then I was listening to it on overdrive, and then it got sent back to the library before I was done. So I started listening to it on Audible, and I love it. I love it so much. Neil Gaiman, I just want to read everything he's ever written ever. There's something really special about listening to him narrate his own book. It's so nice, and it's creepy and wonderful, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So yes, those are all the books that I plan to read in August that I've already started reading. I'm sure I'll have more coherent thoughts about them towards the end of the month or the beginning of September. If you've read any of these books or you plan to read any of these books, let me know down below. I'd love to know what you're reading in the month of August. So that is it. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.